Mark, if you don't mind, can you just kind of introduce yourself then and tell us just a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name's Mark Baker. I just turned 60. I retired from the Air Force in 2004, and I had a career in aviation maintenance, and I did a bunch of other stuff as well. We had decided before we left the military, my wife and I, that we wanted to kind of live a more intentional life, like sort of a farm life. I did a bunch of deployments, and I got to see people who lived like agrarian lifestyles, and I liked it. And you know, living in the Air Force, it's kind of a training environment, a make believe. You know, you don't see the whole picture all the time. You just see bits and pieces of it. And so we had done a little bit of hobby farming at my last duty assignment. And then we moved, after I retired, we moved to Michigan and bought an 80-acre farm, and the adventure began. That was in '04. And we kind of had this broad view of, okay, we're farmers now. And what does that mean? And then we started to learn all the different aspects of it. Factory farming, they came knocking on our door right away because we had land. And that was tempting because they offer you dollars to do things. And but I could smell something wrong. You know, they weren't genuine people. You know, it wasn't what I had experienced before. So we attended small farms conferences, and so we started going that direction. Read some books by Joel Salatin, and since then I've got to meet him, and I guess he's a friend. And so we went that direction with the more sustainable ag thing. And from there, we wound up locking horns with the Department of Agriculture because we were raising a certain type of pig that they said is feral. And I, you know, I was pretty naive. I had come out of the military and I just thought everything was, you know, I thought I was in the real world now. And when I approached them about that, they got quite upset with me, and they said, "You do it now, or you're gonna suffer the consequences." And it was a long process, but we finally prevailed in it. And in spite of our lawyers, we prevailed because I had gone to social media and just made my case to the public. And then I discovered the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and I wove that into the conversation. And so in effect, we hit the press to test button on the Constitution and our rights to farm, and it worked. It worked. So we were able to keep our farm. We kept our animals, and then since then we've really been forced out of commercial farming, because when you lock horns with the state, as we've seen through this whole COVID thing, if you keep going out there and cutting hair, they'll take your license away. So I locked horns with them and I beat them, and they started messing with my licenses. And at one point we said, okay, well, we'll just pursue something else. I applied for a job at the base near me, and we just let our licenses go. We just started raising food for just us, our own beef, pork, chicken, and then we have a big produce operation. And as soon as we let the licenses go, we didn't have any more problem with the state. Like, they didn't have teeth anymore. And what we found out was that when we get a license from them, we're actually entering into a contract with them. And without the license, no more contract, they have no more authority. Hence, we become a Fifth Amendment farm. And we've been doing that now we're going on our 4th year of that. And it's working out pretty good. I'm doing better than I ever have.
Let me, because I'm not a constitutional lawyer to any degree, and my understanding is, the Fifth Amendment, you see people and it's about double jeopardy. You're not allowed to incriminate yourself in court, and all people are always pleading the Fifth. I'm not, I guess I just don't understand how that exactly applies to right to farming. Can you explain that a little better?
Well, when we're on our own property, we're on private property, and we choose to farm a certain way. Let's say that we want to raise all of our animals on pasture. It's our choice. We're the boss of our own property. And we have, in the United States, we have departments within the government, and they would be sort of like contractors that work for the US military. They try to get us under control. They want us all going in a direction that suits their needs. And as a small farm, I say no. I am the one that's going to make the decisions how I'm going to farm, and you guys can just run along. So that my process of farming is protected under the Fifth Amendment. I mean, it's you read it, it's clear. It says my life, liberty, and property, which is my process, is protected under due process of law. So a lot of these things we're saying, these regulations that they come up with where they say, well, you can't process meat on your farm. When we research that, we say, well, there's no law. They're just saying it. They kind of make it up. They make up a regulation, but they enforce it as though it's law. And as soon as a whole bunch of farmers capitulate to it, it's sort of like the mask thing. As soon as a bunch of people capitulate to it, then it's as good as law, because you sort of have to do it. And so in our case with the pig thing, they said that raising pigs out on fields is dangerous because if the pigs get away, they could become feral, and Michigan could wind up like Texas with feral pigs. So it hadn't happened, but they said it could happen, and they wanted to prevent it. So although people have been raising pigs like that for hundreds and hundreds of years, they decided that now we've got to get a handle on this before there's a problem. And so it was, what we found out was it's a typical ploy. They make a problem, and then they want to hand you the solution to the problem. And the solution was only confinement farming would be allowed. So long story short, and I've been listening to you all morning, actually. So I know you're on board with some of this. Long story short, they want to control the food, and they want to take the control of the food away from the everyday guy. And they use the guys, as I heard you, let's see, I was listening, you were being interviewed by Max Lagarve, I guess, and you said, people said, well, hey, you don't have a PhD in nutrition, so what are you doing talking about this? Well, they kind of do the same thing with us. They're saying that we're not professional farmers unless we've gone to the university or some other such thing. And they try to say that we can't do it safely, we can't do it effectively, that it has to be done in total confinement. And I don't believe that's true. And since then we found out that the quality of meats that come out of confinement is not near the quality of the meats that come off of pasture and forage crops. So
Let me just, confinement. I mean, I guess any pig, if it got out, I guess it could become feral. Whether it doesn't really matter what the breed is. I guess maybe I don't know enough about that, but I mean, I assume you have some way to keep the pigs on your property, even if they're not stuck in a shed somewhere. But I mean, because it's in your best interest to keep the pigs on your property so they don't get away and you lose a investment in them. So how do you? I mean, I guess, do you have a way to keeping your pigs on your property?
Oh yeah, you're right. It's sort of like if I was a used car salesman and I just had cars that were rolling off the lot, it would not be good. So I would have a way to secure my property. I mean, that's my job. So we pride ourselves in building some pretty nice fences, and our animals stay in. I mean, if they get out, then my wife's garden doesn't do too well, and then we have a lot of frustration to get them back in. So there's systems available. We build a woven wire fence, and then we put electric on the inside of it. So I'm out of the aviation world, so we're big into redundancy, and I kind of built that into this system. So if they make it through the electric, then the next thing they have to deal with is the woven wire, and we'll catch them before then. We'll see there's a problem before then. But yeah, there is no problem really. It's kind of a made up problem by the Department of Ag, and they seem to be working an agenda for others, to take our abilities to raise our own meats from us.
Yeah, and I guess the type of pig you farm is called a Mangalista. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that is one of the animals that we do. We also graze cattle, a lot of cattle, and we raise pastured poultry as well. But the pig that we settled on was the Mangalista, and it was there was a guy that came to me and wanted to know if I would do it, and I researched it, and I went to a meeting that they had out in Seattle, and it was as good as any other pig, maybe a little better. It was a fat type pig, and it was brought into the United States as sort of a boutique type animal, but it turned out to be a better homesteading pig than anything because they're extremely tough. They can have babies in all weather, and they can eat anything, and they'll still produce high quality meat and fat too. Their fat is highly praised. So we've stayed with them. We like them.
Yeah, and I'm not a pig expert by any means, but I mean I understand there's like some pigs that are suited for lard and some pigs are suited for bacon. It has to do with the relative fat amount. Are these ones more lard suited, I suppose?
Yeah, they call them a lard pig. That's what they call them. So it's going to have about a 50-50 lard to protein ratio, about maybe a little bit more protein than that. And so you get a real thick back fat off of them, and people use that for different things, cooking, any place that you can use butter or shortening, anything like that, you can use this, and it's far more compatible with the human body. But I believe that if it's raised properly, it's even better. Like if the animals are eating forages that we grow for them on the fields, then they're kind of harvesting the sunlight and the rain, and then they make it available to us to use.
Now, I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, is it something about the breed itself that they don't like, or is it just the way you were particularly reason? Because apparently there's other Mangalista pig farms in Michigan even that have not sort of dealt with what you've dealt with. What do you think the ultimate reason for them targeting you for whatever you're doing?
Well, the ultimate reason that they targeted me was because I stuck my head up. When it first started, I got a notification from one of our chefs that we were providing the meat to. He says, "Hey, I heard your pigs are illegal now." And I said, "What? I don't know anything about that." So I called one of the ag commissioners that I had gotten to know a little bit in passing. And he says, yeah, the Mangalista, that's illegal now because they say it's a feral pig. And I was like, what could this be? And, I researched it and wound up in touch with our senator, and his office people thought it was an outrage too. And so there was a lot of discussion about it. And then they had a meeting, the Department of Natural Resources. They were the ones that were tasked to implement this because they're the ones with the guns. And they had a meeting, and they were going to tell us all about how our pigs were illegal. And I thought we were going to have some input in this meeting, but it was one of them one-sided meetings, it was more like a briefing. But they implemented a lot of techniques to just kind of tell us, sit down, shut up, and this is what you're going to do because we friggin' say so. That was really their attitude. And I was about 4 years out of the military at that time, and I just wasn't ready for that. And when I said, hey, wait a minute, you guys don't you guys don't understand what's going on here. These are not feral pigs. We have fences. We take care of these animals. We grow them for slaughter. They're not feral pigs. And they didn't take that very well. They don't like people trying to reason with them. And so I became the bump in the road that they had to smack down. And, they tried like 3 different things. It was first they said that they were going to arrest me, and then they said that they were going to exterminate my animals. And then they said that they were my children would probably wind up in state custody. They said, and then the grand finale, which I thought was, they threatened my kids before they threatened my pocketbook. They said that they were going to fine us $10,000 per animal unless we killed them or sold them out of state. That was their ultimatum. And, I told them to go to hell. And it was like, then it was their next move. And they didn't have a next move after that. They never had a next move. It was always threats. And we said, go ahead, do it. Like they said, we're going to come to your house on the first day of April of 2012 or 2012. Yeah. And we're going to arrest you. And I said, well, I'll be here. I'll be waiting for you. And because I didn't think they could, I hadn't broken a law, but that doesn't really stop these bureaucrats. They'll threaten you. And so I waited for them and they never showed up. Of course, I sent my wife and kids away, and that rattled them a little bit, I think. And so it was just threat after threat. And then finally, 10 days before our court case, they moved for dismissal. And I said it was in spite of our lawyers, because I kept pushing the lawyers to talk about my Fifth Amendment rights in the courtroom, and they just wouldn't do it. They'd say they're going to, but they wouldn't. And got to the point where I got rid of 2 of them, but the case was dismissed. The judge granted a dismissal. And their reason for the dismissal was they said, we no longer have a problem with Mark's pigs. But for 3 years, they had a huge problem with my pigs, and they cost us a ton of money and heartache and everything like that. But in the end, it was all just threats. They threaten you, and most of the time farmers just capitulate because you don't know. I mean, you want to know, but you just don't know. And we sometimes look to legal firms for answers, and they don't want to play the Constitution game, because with the Constitution, I don't need them. This shouldn't have even been an issue. The Fifth Amendment outlines that my property belongs to me, and unless you have a law, you can't take it from me. And they didn't have a law. They just created I don't even know what they called it a declaratory ruling. So they just made a declaration that, and I happen to have it right here in front of me, just to refresh my memory, but they came up with 7 characteristics. And if your pig had any of the characteristics, then your pig was feral. That was how they framed this. And I kid you not, Sean, the 7th characteristic is characteristics unknown at this time. That was one of their characteristics.
Now that leaves a little bit of room for interpretation, doesn't it? Now, when you say they, because I'm kind of, who is the Department of Agriculture? Is it the police? Is it who's the they that's doing this? And I mean, was the police involved? I mean, how does that work?
Well, the police were involved as much as we tried to get them to protect us from the state. So this declaratory ruling that I have here, I'd like to show it to you when Jill comes in. She'll fix this camera, but this came from the Department of Natural Resources. So that's a state agency. And, we have 3 branches of government, and the local government, I elect them in, and I appealed to my sheriff to protect me from the state. The state was trying to take my property from me without due process of law. And so I appealed to the sheriff to, run defense for me. He wouldn't, but the rest of the country pressured him to do his job. And it caused a huge stir. I got involved with Richard Mack, Sheriff Mack. He's a constitutional sheriff. And, we made a lot of gains in that direction, but the sheriff never did intervene. But then it fell to my level as the head of household. And I said, I will not get rid of my property because it's protected under the Fifth Amendment. And that was enough. That was enough, believe it or not. We always think that we got to appeal to a higher authority, but the US Constitution gives us the kryptonite against these guys, right? They cannot get past it. So as soon as they start threatening you, you know that you're in a good place with these bureaucrats. And, I heard a lot of what you said this morning, and maybe listeners are going to be thinking, what is this, some grand conspiracy against food? And I would say, yes, it is. They want to centralize food production so that they can control it. And there's all kinds of people that come in and they parasite off the system. It was a whole lot better as a country when we had millions of small farms that were all flowing food into the system, because we had, better biosecurity back then. We weren't going to have one disease wipe out everything, which we've seen, lately. We weren't going to have mass outbreaks of things, foodborne illnesses, because systems are local. But that's the direction they're going. They want to centralize all the food production. And it's out in the open now. When this was going on years ago, when we went through this problem, this was back in 2011 when it started. I kind of had a feeling that's what they were doing. But if you mentioned it to people, they'd say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. You're nut. And you would lose traction really quick with the public. But now people understand this. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge now.
Yeah, and was there? Do you feel that there's some industry, like, obviously, and I know the beef industry pretty well. There's 4 packers that control the vast majority of the beef in the United States, something like 85%.
Yeah.
And I know Smithfield is one of the big poultry producers, and it's been bought out by China recently. But was there pressure from those guys to shut you down? I mean, we see this sort of desire for these companies to monopolize these, the food production. And I certainly see the writing on the wall where they're becoming protein companies, where it's not necessarily meat, but it's protein. And I mean, what's going to result in the lowest cost of goods sold is what they're going to go to. And so, you'll see these big companies like Tyson and Cargill promoting the plant-based meats as a quote unquote healthy alternative to regular beef, probably just because it's more financially lucrative for them to do so. So did you see there was any kind of pushback from some of these major meat packers or something like that?
Certainly did. In this case, it was called MMP, Michigan Morse. Let's see, MPP, Michigan Pork Producers. They signed documents to put the small producers out. They were in full support of what they called the Feral Swine Initiative. And they were in full support of it. And they weren't the only ones. The chicken producers, turkey, beef, they were all in line with it, because it was the crack in the dam. Like once they got rid of one guy, then it was a steamroller. They couldn't stop it. They would have gone through all the different species, and they would have said, no, the only guys that can safely produce this product are the guys that do it in climate controlled barns. That's what they like to call them, climate controlled barns. And a lot of this is taught at the university level too. So you have young people that really believe this, that it's a superior way to go. And they don't, they're taught not to, well, I can't, it seems as though they are taught to not believe what they see, but to believe what they're taught about agriculture. And here we're in agriculture, and we're observing it. We don't have a PhD in farming, but I make these observations every single day about the health of the animals, health of the soil, how they would probably go in the natural world. And it's pretty fascinating. It's like a journey, really. It's not, you don't really arrive there, I don't think.
Let me ask you, because feral pigs are a problem in Texas, and how did they become a problem? It's not like this is a complete non-entity, but what was an issue going on in Texas, and why do they have so many issues with feral pigs in Texas now?
Yeah. Okay. I have some intimate knowledge on that. We have two people in our orbit that made a trip down there. One guy was a videographer that was trying to make sense of our whole situation that was going on, and he wanted to go down there and find out about the feral swine. I could call it problem, or I could call it industry, right? Either or. Like, it depends on which side of the fence you are. If you're a golf course owner in Texas, then it's a problem. But if you're a ranch owner and you own a couple of helicopters and you guys pay to go up in the helicopters and shoot feral pigs, then it's a benefit to you, right? So what we found out, and one of the other people that was with me on this, he wound up getting a job down there because he was making more money. He would make more money down there working the feral swine industry than he was making up here. And his job is to trap feral swine. Hey, can you fix the camera on this? Jill's home. She's going to fix this for us real quick. Get rid of that dog. They trap these animals, and then they turn them loose on hunting preserves. And then guys come from, up north, they go down to Texas and they hunt them. And it's a huge industry. So at this point, like this friend of mine says, at this point, if we wanted to wipe them out, we could. There's definitely means to totally wipe them out. But there's a struggle between people making a living off of them and the damage that they're doing. So they try to manage them away from golf courses and resorts and things like that, and keep them in the rural areas where people can make money off of them. They actually sell it in stores, feral swine. If anytime we go off, let me know, Sean, because Jill's trying to fix this so the camera will come on.
Yeah, that's fine. I can hear. Okay. What, when you talk about, I guess, the different pigs and eating them, is there any problem? People have been eating wild boar and, wild pig meat for centuries, I assume. It's fine to eat. Is there any reason or any concern about the quality of that? And, I guess your pigs, they're not wild. They're managed on a farm, I assume. So what's the difference between one of yours? Is there a health concern? Is there a health benefit? What's the difference?
I think so. I can compare them between our pigs and, say, a CAFO pig, a confinement operation pig. A confinement pig would be eating mostly corn and soy, and then some other stuff, not a lot of other stuff. And then our pigs would be eating forages. So we have fields that we plant just for them. So they'll be eating turnips and field peas and radishes, things like that. So we have big fields that we cultivate for them. And so the fat on them is going to be way more dense, nutrient dense in the stuff that maybe we want. Not saying soy and corn are inherently bad. It's just that they kind of get them out of balance on the animal. So we need a better balance of nutrients. So I think ours are better. Yeah, ours are better.
And so
Bill's trying to figure this thing out, and it's just
That's okay.
It's
That's,
amazing to me. She
Cut you
told me
guys
do
off.
this, and this, and now there's a totally different screen up, right?
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't
we're
know.
hitting start meeting.
Click allow. Oh, allow.
Jill's here. That's her.
okay.
This is Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Jill. How are you? Let me ask you, you said I guess the majority of this happened in 2012. What was it? And you said you reached out on social media. Tell me how that went and how did that turn around for you?
Oh, there we go. Can you see me now? I'm.
No.
Isn't this great? I made a video and I just turned it loose, and a lot of people resonated with it. You know, they'd been abused by government agencies, and so people really resonated with it. And I had a lot of people that came to my aid with money and resources and advice, and it was across the country. Where when we went to our senator's office, they were more go along to get along. They were more like, well, maybe you should pick a different pig. But I said, well, if they can take my property from me, what's to keep them from taking your property from you? I mean, it's mine. It's not illegal. And so I said, no, I'm not up for that. I'm not going to do it. And so we had a large group of Americans that stood with us on this and said, this is our property and we're going to keep it. You guys might not like it, but we're a free country. And I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that didn't end when I retired. So I felt pretty strongly about this. And along the way, I think you did too, you lost people along the way doing the same thing. And I wasn't going to let some state bureaucrats just say, because we say so. I wasn't going to do that. And they could throw all the threats they want at me, but it's not over until it's over. And as it turned out, we could go further than they could go. We could stick it out longer than them.
You mentioned about, there's a license. I don't know, again, I don't know the regulations around farming, and I'm sure every state has a little bit of different interpretation with that. But you said I got rid of my license, as a physician. I'm a licensed physician, currently. I have an active license. I don't use it. I'm not practicing right now, but I have a license. But I mean, if I were to practice medicine without a license, I mean, there are people that go to jail for that, and I could be thrown in jail for that. And so how is that? I mean, how does it work with the different fields? Because I mean, you're saying some state regulator says you need a license to farm, or maybe you do, maybe you don't, maybe you don't. Maybe that's, but you said, I don't want the license and therefore you can't mess with me. How does that work?
Well, I'm not sure how it works being a doc. I don't know about that, but in my case, I have a butcher shop right on the farm, and it's when we first got out of the Air Force, we called the Department of Ag, said, what do we need if we want to do this? And they said, oh, you need a license to run a butcher shop. And I said, well, okay, I'm a big regulation guy. And so I got the license. I started off $70 a year. And then when we ended, it was over $200 a year. And all it really did was give us a little piece of paper, about less than a quarter of a sheet of paper. And it had some stuff written on it, said, display this proudly. And if you send your check in, they send you this piece of paper, and then you are licensed. If you have that license, then you can go to farmers markets, you can go to restaurants, and you can take your products to retail stores, because those establishments have licenses too, saying they're only going to do business with guys like me who have licenses. So the Department of Ag runs this outfit, this organization where everybody that's in our group can do business with each other, but you can't do business with anybody outside that group. And so and you never know any different once you're in the system, because you think that you're doing things the right way. So when I said, okay, I no longer want the license, then it just precluded me from selling to farmers markets, restaurants and retail stores. But then it opened up all the families, and I'd rather sell directly to families than to restaurants anyway, because you sell to a family, they know you, and they'll go to bat for you if they had to. You sell to a restaurant, they never know who you are. The people that are consuming the product never know who you are and don't really care. They went there just to, and so we wind up, our patrons are more people like you, actually, that are eating intentionally for a reason. They're not just eating whatever they have. They're looking for nutrient dense food. And so that's who we service now, and that's a good thing.
Have you, I mean, like I said, obviously you made the shift, you got rid of your license, you're not selling to restaurants or farmers markets or, some of these other, groups, and you're selling to individuals. Do you see any challenge to that capacity coming on the horizon? Do you feel that that's still in jeopardy, or is there, I mean, I guess market corporation, like you talked about, we see guys like Bill Gates buying up all the farmland, and what he's going to do with that is still unclear. But I mean, do you feel that that's still a continued threat?
Actually, no, it's actually worked the other way, because people knew that they should have a relationship with farms so they had food security. They knew they should do that, but they just didn't get pushed over that edge to go there. But then COVID happened, and like around here, you had to wait in line to get into a store because they'd only let a few people in. And so food, it wasn't short, they just made it austere. And then the people who didn't want to take the drive to the farm are like, oh yeah, I'll take the drive to the farm. I can sit in the luxury of my car, and I don't have to wear a face mask at the farm and all this stuff. So then they've moved, those groups of people have moved to the point where they'll come and they'll spend money with us, which is what we want. And that transaction, by the way, for your listening audiences, that transaction between one American citizen and another American citizen is protected, and we don't need anybody in between us. If I want to sell you a bale of hay, that's between you and I, and that contract is protected by our U.S. Constitution. So it's completely legal if somebody wants to come to my farm and buy a pound of meat or a gallon of milk. It's between me and them. They don't have to go and ask permission from this government. Can I go to Mark's house and buy some milk? They don't have to do that. And they shouldn't do that. They actually shouldn't do that. So no, I think that it's really opened things up now. The families that we sell to really appreciate us, and moms see their kids' eyes sparkle, and they know it's because of the food that they're giving them. So I think it's actually getting better.
Yeah, I'm just, I guess when you say you've got your private property, you can do with it what you want, but then, I mean, there's still things that you can't do. I mean, you can't harvest plutonium on your property. I mean, you can't build, bombs on your property. I don't know, maybe you can, I don't know. I mean, but I mean, so how do you know, like, I guess they say it's a public threat. I mean, I guess they're going after you because saying you are a public nuisance or a public threat to the surrounding area with your pigs because it potentially become feral.
Yeah.
I just don't know where they draw a line, because if I'm at home, doing something, building fertilizer bombs or something like that, I'm gonna have the the ATF or somebody on my with a SWAT team in my backyard, I imagine. So
Yeah.
how is it? I guess I don't know how they define the nuisance and the threats.
Well, it's pretty easy. Like your process per the Fifth Amendment is protected under due process of law. So long as your process isn't against the law, like there are laws against human trafficking, there are laws against armed robbery, there are laws against manufacturing, explosive material. There are laws against that. Just because you're on private property doesn't mean you can do it. You can't. But something like raising a particular type of pig, unless they can get a law passed, and I mean a law, it's got to go through the House, then the Senate, and be signed into law. Unless they can do that, they need to hold. They need to respect, the line between private property and public property. And we found out that that's the case. They do have to respect it. And they do respect it.
So, I mean, this would be a contrast between like a state regulation or a licensing agency regulation and an actual physical law that's been, passed by either the state or the federal legislature.
Yes, that is. So regulatory agencies have ways to encourage people to come into what they call compliance, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go that direction. You don't, and I proved that. I hit the press to test button. They made the threat, and I said, "Go ahead, take your best shot," and they backed off right away because they're not prepared. They're used to people just capitulating. So I don't. You can do this with almost any license that there is, and just say, "Well, I'm not going to get a license, and I'm going to do it." And I'll just wait and see what happens. And then you have to field it from there. I don't know what happened if you're a doctor and you just open up a private clinic someplace. I don't know. But, I listened to you a little bit here when I was asked to come on, and I thought I better find out who this guy is. And you're giving some really good information, really good advice. And I wouldn't say that that's not practicing. I don't know. You didn't cut on me, but you gave me some good stuff, some good food for thought.
Well, I guess, like I said, the definition of practicing medicine, there's some sort of fairly explicit things of what you can do. I'm not prescribing medications or deep prescribing or physically entering in an individual relationship and, portraying it as direct medical advice. And so I think those things are a little bit different. But I mean, your grandmother can tell you what to eat. Your grandmother can tell you, hey, you're going to get fat, stop eating that, or you're going to get diabetes. There's no regulations that say that. When I hear people saying, you can't, as a doctor, you shouldn't be talking about nutrition because you're not a registered dietitian. And actually some states it varies on who's allowed to prescribe nutrition, I suppose. But I'm at the same time, I'm like, my mother told me what to eat the whole time I was a kid.
Yeah.
Did she have a specific license? No, she didn't. So, I mean, you can't really see how that's enforced. I guess this is a thing that the unfortunate thing is you had to turn to social media, it sounds like, to get, well, I guess it was support from the people to buy your product. I guess, is that how that worked? Is that where the social media came into play?
No, the pressure came from, if I asked people to call the Attorney General's office, they did it. And when I asked people to call the sheriff's office, they did it. That's where the pressure came, because these people, the sheriff and the Attorney General, they're sort of like, one's a local law enforcement guy. The sheriff, he's the top law enforcement guy in the county. And the Attorney General, he's the top law enforcement guy in the state. And when people said, hey, Mr. Top Law Enforcement Official, why are you not protecting this man's constitutional right to own his property? It put the Attorney General between his constituents, his real constituents, which at the time he was really looking out for the lobby, the pork growers and all those, because they are the ones that contribute to his campaign, and his true constituents, which would be us, the voters. So he was between a rock and a hard place, and he went the wrong way. And people saw that. They saw that out in the open, that he was protecting the pork industry and the Department of Agriculture and Department of Natural Resources, and not protecting, the apple of the Constitution's eye. The apple of the Constitution's eye is me, the citizen, not those guys. And so he got voted out. He lost, it's probably ruined his political career, because he ran for governor and he got smashed. And our sheriff got let go too. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and I don't know, there's an analogous thing going on. There's a gym in New Jersey, a guy named, I think it's called Ian Smith, I think, and he's basically refused to shut down his gym, in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic,
Yeah.
and says that, it's my, and he lost his license and he can't charge money, but he gets donors, and they like boarded his doors shut or something like that. And he's been getting fined like 15,000 every single day. His fines are up over like $2 million, and he keeps saying, I'm not going to comply. And, it's kind of this the same sort of situation that is going on there. And it's a similar type of situation there. And, the governor of that state, I think, is probably fairly unpopular at this point. It's seen as bullying. And, it's kind of one of those things where, it's a different situation, because in your case, probably most people, didn't find you as a threat. I mean, there may have been a few fringe people that thought that was a problem, but most people don't. In his situation, half the population would be concerned, thinking that he's dangerous. Whereas, so it's kind of a, kind of a similar thing in a different circumstance. But it's good to see people, standing up for their constitutional rights and being successful, doing that. And I think most people I would imagine are unaware of what's in the Constitution for them. And it's kind of unfortunate that you have to, even your lawyers aren't willing to do that, which I thought was just kind of amazing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they have a dog in the fight. Lawyers get to go into court and they get to argue minutia, instead of the judge saying, hey, this is a Fifth Amendment issue, case closed. So they are definitely not pro-Constitution, because it precludes them from the argument. This shouldn't have even gone to court. My property is protected under the Fifth Amendment, and the Department of Natural Resources wanted to talk about whether the animals had a straight tail or a curly tail. And I say that none of that really matters. What matters is it's my property. If you want to outlaw a pig, do it. But you can't regulate me out. And that's what's going on in this country in a lot of ways. The departments are the ones that are relieving us of our constitutional rights. And most people don't know how to deal with that. And so we've kind of made it our business for a while now to brief people on this anytime we can.
I was going to ask you, have you run in, since you were public about this, 8 or 9 years ago, have you had other people in similar situations that you've seen resolve it in a similar manner?
Yes, sir, we have. We have kind of an informal group. It just started as just for fun, a Facebook thing. It's called Anyone Can Farm Tribe. And people will come to us with questions. And one particular one that I can think of that I thought we dealt with really well was one of our tribe's people. She's a young gal, and she got a cow, and she milked the cow, and then she showed pictures on Facebook of these gallon jugs of milk that she'd got, and she was real proud of that. And I was real proud of her for doing it, because it's not easy to do and takes some fortitude to work through it. Well, then she got a knock on the door from somebody from the Department of Health locally and the Department of Agriculture state. They came in, two of them came at one time, and they wanted to pressure her into falling in line with their guidelines as far as raw milk goes. And so she called us, and I said, no, you don't have to buy into their program. If you want to share your raw milk with your friends and your neighbors, and you want to sell it, that's fine. But if you enter into their guideline contract, they'll have you doing milk shares and herd shares and everything else. But what it does, it gives them the ability to come and look over your shoulder. And so in essence, what you're doing, you're partnering with them, and they really have the final say. They can stop you from doing what you're doing. But if we advised her, No, just tell them if they have questions that they can send it to you via email, and then tell them to blind, and that you would blind carbon copy, or you would copy it and send it to me. And they decline to do that because they don't like any attention on their shakedown, really is what it is. They don't like attention on it. And we bring a lot of attention to it. And so they backed off immediately. Over the weekend, they said, oh no, we're not going to engage on this. And so now this gal is free to do what she wants. You know, some people have said to me, well, isn't that a little irresponsible? You know, isn't raw milk dangerous? And, you know, that's one of the things that they've done. They run an adverse information campaign. They say things like raw milk is dangerous, and people believe it. You know, people believe all kinds of stuff. We've been seeing, you know, it's easy to make people believe stuff. But my kids grew up, I got 8 kids. They grew up on milk, and, you know, they're fine. We're all fine. We drink milk every day. So yeah, we have seen a lot of good things happen because of this group. You know, the group is supposed to be just to help people to work through the processes of, well, how do you milk a cow? How do you process a chicken? How do you process a cow? But along the way, it's like, hey, how do I deal with this guy that just drove in the driveway and, you know, is asking questions? How do I deal with that? And there is an answer, and there are solutions to it.
Mark, thank you. I've got to unfortunately run to the airport and pick some people up that are waiting for me. This has been very informative. So 2 things. One, we have a resource of local ranchers and people like you that we encourage our members to, you know, look at as potential sources for food. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe we can get you to add yourself to our growing list of, because direct, you know, like I said, I think direct food and supporting locally is what we need to do and continue to protect that. But where do people go to find out, you know, where they can get some of your products to support you, and more information about if they want to learn about, you know, their constitutional rights as it comes to producing food and so on and so forth?
Sure. There's probably 2 places. One is bakersgreenacres.com. That's our sales website. And there's a lot of other information there about the classes and stuff that we do. And then the other one is we do a nightly podcast, and that is Baker's Green Acres YouTube. And we go on 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and I take questions and expound on stuff. And there's a growing interest in production of clean meats and things like that. So a lot of people are interested in it these days.
Mark, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I like your last name.
Yeah,
I said, I
me
like
too.
it.
I got to tell you something, Sean. I got to tell you something. So
Okay.
that real nice gal from Canada called me and set this up. And I had seen your name come across my feed a couple times, and I keyed on it because of the last similarity in last names, right? And so then I said, well, I better listen to this guy and see what he's all about. So I start listening to you, and I was cutting up a beef at the time. And all of a sudden, I just said, I'm going to try this. I am going to try this because it resonated with me. And so I'm in day 4. I'm in day 4. And now when I'm eating beef, it's almost like I'm kind of pounding it, you know. I'm doing it for a reason. And maybe it's the placebo effect, I don't know, but I had a sore knee, and it was because I twisted it and I was really babying it, and my other knee started to get kind of sore too. So when I want to stand up, it was like a slower process, less instantaneous. But I've been doing nothing but meat and beef. The meat that I'm eating is beef, and I think I feel a difference. I'm pretty sure I do. I got to stick.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's probably real. I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, I mean, yeah, I could put a poll in the numbers of the people here, the 50 people here, and probably 2/3 of them will say they felt better from a joint standpoint. So
Mm.
anyway, Mark, I gotta
Great.
go. Thank you so much. Hopefully maybe we'll get you back on down the road if you're okay with that. Would that be okay?
Love to. Anytime you want.
All right. Thanks, Mark. You guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. And remember, Monday is 1st of March, so we start March Meatness. So don't forget to participate and talk about that, guys. All right.
Okay.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.